Hello everybody, Mike Westfall here with McDonald Garden Center, and today we're talking about rose royalty, the queen of flowers. So whenever we talk about roses, I kind of wanted to encompass everything. So this is going to be a guide to the queen of flowers, a complete care of roses. So it'll kind of generalize everything so that you can kind of get a great understanding. By no means am I a rose expert by any means, but I've grown great roses before. We carry a great supply. I've learned from some amazing people here at the Garden Center, and so hopefully you'll get a lot out of this because we're going to cover pretty much the whole thing, and we're going to go fairly quickly because there's a lot of information here. So please feel free to ask questions. Darlene, I see the audio keeps skipping. Hopefully that's not something on our end, but we'll keep an eye on that and we'll see if we can fix it as we go along. But we're going to cover all of pretty much everything that I can think of, the basics of growing roses. And roses are so much fun to grow. One of, I think, the best things about roses is instant gratification. You know, so many plants we plant, especially shrubs, and you might not see the rewards for a couple years. You might not see the full benefits. You might not see the full potential right away, but roses grow very quickly and offer instant gratification. That first year, you're going to get roses. You're going to get some size. It's going to be a really, really rewarding experience. And that's why I love roses, whether you're growing the hybrid teas, floribundas, grandiflora, shrub roses, all of those different options. We've got a great selection for you. So we're going to talk about all of those different things as well. So let's get right into it, and we'll talk about rose selection. So rose selection is kind of tricky. There's so many different types. I mean, there's just numerous varieties, types of roses out there to choose from. And I kind of like to group them into kind of three main categories, which is going to be your climbing roses. So roses that will actually climb, that put out longer shoots, whether you've got to attach them or that'll naturally twine. And then we've got, your shrub roses, which is kind of that knockout rose picture all the way over there. That knockout rose is a shrub rose. There's lots of different types of shrub roses. They're very easy to grow. We're going to talk about those a little bit more at length. And then we've got our grandiflora, hybrid teas, and floribundas, which are a little bit more what I kind of group into what I say long stem roses. Now there's English roses, classic roses, modern roses. We're not going to get into all of those specifics, but these are typically the ones that you're going to find if you're out shopping around for roses. And then specifically here at the Garden Center, we carry shrub roses, climbing roses, hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas. So we're going to talk about those kind of three main groups. So the first one we're going to talk about is shrub roses. Shrub roses are fairly new. I think Knockouts just got their 20-year anniversary, so they've been around for a while. I've been in the garden center industry for almost 20 years, and I remember them first coming out when I started, and just huge success because they're so easy to grow. And there's lots and lots of different types of shrub roses out there. I mean, even kind of rugosa roses might be considered that. Rugosas are a little bit harder to find nowadays because the knockouts and the carpet roses have kind of taken over this world. And those are the two main ones that we carry, are knockout roses and carpet roses. So you can see kind of the difference. The big picture over there is carpet roses. Those are going to be a little bit lower growing. They're only going to get about maybe 2 to 3 feet tall, maybe even lower sometimes. And they're going to sprawl out. So they're going to get about 2 feet tall by about 4 to 5 feet wide. So you're going to cover a large area width-wise, but you're not going to block a whole lot. So they're great in mass plantings, as you can see there, and come in a lot of different colors, from yellows to ambers to corals to pinks and reds. Great selection of carpet roses, and they're very easy to care for. And then you've got your knockout roses, which is kind of one of the main groups of shrub roses these days. This is this new one, the mini petite, that you can grow in containers, and really shrub roses are great for containers. You can grow a great shrub rose in a container for many years. And then this is the traditional knockout rose, the double knockout roses. And knockout roses, they've come out with so many different varieties. We don't carry them all. We carry some of what we think are the best, the double knockout, the traditional knockout, sunny, maybe some of the pinks, and this petite. We'll carry a lot of different types of the knockout roses. They're very fun and easy to grow. Instant gratification. Knockout roses are going to get somewhere around 4x4 to 5x5. I've seen them bigger. Depends on how you prune them. We're going to talk about pruning a little bit more extensively here towards the end of this webinar. But knockout roses are disease resistant, They don't really have a whole lot of insect issues. Yeah, Japanese beetles can get in there. We're going to talk about how to control those as well. But shrub roses are designed to be grown for ease. You don't have to do a whole lot of deadheading. In fact, most of your knockout roses and carpet roses are designed that when they flower, it doesn't produce a seed. That seed isn't viable, it eventually dies, and it keeps on blooming. You can deadhead, you can do certain things to them if you want to, but really it's a rose that you can kind of set it out and forget it, and it's super, super easy to grow, and that's why people love them. Disease resistance and low maintenance. And shrub roses are a great option for people that just want the look of roses, but maybe you're not going to get that long stem cut rose. You can still get great kind of bundles of roses, but you're not going to get that long stem rose. That's what you're going to get from your floribundas and grandifloras and hybrid teas. We'll talk about here in just a second. Climbing roses. Climbing roses are a great option if you've got archways or trellises that you want to grow roses on. They're very, very easy to grow. Basically, climbing roses put out much longer shoots of growth in a season. You're still going to want to deadhead them, and you might have to do a little bit more control. We'll talk about that as we get into the next group. But climbing roses are, generally speaking, fairly easy. You get a lot nicer rose. You get that fragrance that you get. You might not get as much with your shrub roses, but you get that fragrance. You get that enjoyment. You get, you can use cut flowers out of the climbing roses, and they just add height to the garden and flowers. A lot of times when we're looking for vining plants, the selection isn't quite as big as we would hope sometimes. I mean, we've got jasmine, which is amazing, clematis, which is a great one, but I love climbing roses. There's the Lady Banks rose, which is kind of this yellow one right here. That is very, very, it doesn't have any thorns in it, which is kind of nice. And it's a little bit of a smaller rose, but it's a great one. And there's a huge, huge selection of climbing roses. I think, New Dawn is that pink one over there. It's a classic. It's a favorite of many people that grow roses. And there's just a great color assortment too. So when we talk about blooming vines, sometimes we don't get quite the amount of color that we want, but with roses, you've got a huge choice in color arrangement when it comes to climbing roses, and they're pretty easy to care for. We'll talk about a little bit more specifically on how to prune them, as it's a little bit different than the other ones, but very, very easy to grow and a great selection. And then we've got hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas. So this is kind of what I call long stem roses. Some might group them as like modern roses. Basically anything from 1867 on are considered modern roses, which are basically going to be, hybrids that, try to, increase the disease and insect resistance, as some of the old-fashioned roses had more of those issues. Now the old-fashioned roses, you've seen like probably David Austin or English roses. Those have become pretty popular again. A little bit harder to get your hands on those. Sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. But hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas are some of the best. And we carry a whole series called Hassle Free, which are designed, or not designed, but selected because of their disease resistance. Because I'm going to talk about disease resistance a lot, because in the Hampton Roads area specifically, but really anywhere that you're growing roses, humidity is going to cause issues. You're going to get great roses kind of mid to late spring, and then kind of as the summer progresses, you're going to start to see some issues, and we're going to take care of those. I'm going to help you take care of those. It's very, very simple. But hybrid teas are typically your long stem rose. You think of, what type of rose do you go and you buy for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day when you get a nice bouquet of long stem roses? That's going to be hybrid teas. So that's going to be this guy right here, kind of formal shaped flower. And going to grow 1 to 2 to maybe 3 flowers on a single stem. So you're going to get kind of that nice, what I call long stem or single stem roses. And then your grandifloras and floribundas are kind of similar but different. So grandifloras, which is kind of this yellow one up here, and floribundas, which is that farther pink one over, very similar looking, right? You're going to get more clusters of flowers, but they're going to be very, very kind of peony, heavy petal count typically. Sometimes you'll get some that are a little bit more on the single or triple count of blooms, and that's really going to be in the grandiflora, because grandiflora is a cross between a floribunda and a hybrid tea. So really what that means is grandiflora, think big. They get bigger. So grandifloras are going to get somewhere around probably 5 to 6 feet tall, whereas floribundas are going to get about 3 to 4 feet tall. So slightly different size, but similar blooming characteristics, although because grandifloras are a cross between floribundas and hybrid teas, then sometimes you're going to get more of that long stem kind of look. Now, hybrid teas typically get in that 4 to 5 foot range, taller shrubs with those nice long stems. So Kristen said disease resistant but not virus resistant. No, they are virus resistant too. For the most part. Resistance is one thing. To not get it at all is another thing. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about how to kind of control those and keep those at bay when I get to the rose care portion at the end. So stick around, Kristen. I'll help you out with that if you've experienced any of those things. And we do here in Hampton Roads, unfortunately. But hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribunda are kind of the next group. Now, where do we use these? We can use them all over the landscape. They're great in the landscape. And you can kind of see that far picture over there. Mass plantings. I love mass plantings in the landscape. If you got space and you want to cover up some space and you want some shrubs, shrub roses are going to be very, very easy, low maintenance. You can do formal gardening. You could grow one in a pot. They actually grow in pots pretty well. They don't need a huge amount of soil to grow pretty well. We're going to talk about what they do need next. But you can use them in so many different places around the landscape. They're great plants. They're great companion plants. They're very easy to grow. And they bloom pretty much all the way through mid to late spring, all the way through the summer. So very, very fun to grow. And like I said, super rewarding because you get a shrub pretty quickly. It's going to grow fairly rapidly, and it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of take care of. So I know probably about, maybe it was probably 12 or 13 years ago, I did kind of a formal section in my landscape for some hybrid teas, grandifloras, floribundas, and was very successful. Enjoyed it for many, many years. And so it's a lot of fun to do and super, super rewarding. So that's kind of how you can use them around the landscape. Let's talk about what you need. Well, you need sun. That's the most important thing. We need as much sun as we possibly can. You want 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. Less than 6, you're going to struggle. And what that means is your roses are going to stretch a little bit, so they're going to reach for the light. And when they do that, they get a little bit kind of wiry looking and kind of stretched out looking. So we want to give them as much sun as we possibly can. Don't try and grow roses in shade. If you've got 6 hours or less, let's say you got 5 to 6 hours, it's good hot afternoon sun, but there's not much other than that, I would try probably a shrub rose. Those are going to be where you're the most successful. What typically happens in shade is powdery mildew and a little bit of black spot, and those are kind of the issues there that you're probably going to experience, which can be handled and controlled, and we'll talk about that. But typically speaking, you're going to get the best results if you can get up to 7, 8, 9 hours of sunlight. That's going to be your full sun. So, and then pH is super important. So our pH here in the Hampton Roads area is typically naturally around a 5.5, and Rose is like a 6.5. So we always want to do a pH test. We do free pH test here. You can always just bring in a little baggie with some soil in it. Dig down about 3 to 4 inches where you're going to be planting your roses, and we can do a free pH test for you and get you in the right range. It's most likely going to be lime to bring your pH up, and we'll tell you exactly how much you need by your square footage, and that'll pull your pH up into the right range. So that's important. Now, what does pH mean? pH really means that in that range, the rose can get nutrients out of the soil naturally, and it can use the plant food that you give it at 100% rate. If you're in a 5.5 and you're giving it plant food, then it's only going to get about 50%. And then let's say you're a 4.5, they're only going to get about 20% of the plant food and not be able to get the nutrients out of the soil. So that's why pH is so important, and that's why we always recommend checking it. And then planting. So let's say we've selected our roses, we've figured out where we want to put them, we've got full sun, we know what we want to do, we want to pick a shrub rose or a hybrid tea, whatever type of rose we've decided to use, and it's time to plant. Where our soil in our area probably looks a little bit like that, which is clay-based. No matter what kind of soil you have, we're going to want to amend with compost and perlite. The only time that I'm going to omit perlite is if we're in a sandy soil. So if it's super, super sandy, it drains really, really, really well, I would omit perlite, always keeping compost in, and I'd add peat moss. That'd be the only difference. But typically we've got, a clay-based soil, a heavier soil, and no matter what kind of soil you have, even if you think it's nice and rich and loamy, I'm still gonna recommend for roses adding compost and perlite. Compost is gonna add nutrients, it's gonna add organic matter, which is just so, so, so important when you're planting shrubs, because this is the place it's gonna live. So I always say invest almost as much into your shrub or into your soil as you do into your shrub. So if you're buying, a $50 rose, $60 rose, then you're going to want to invest some into that soil because that's where it's going to live for its entirety unless you decide to move it, which then you're going to amend the soil again. So we want to invest into our soil. So at planting, we want to use perlite, compost, and our soil. So you still want to keep your native soil in there. Why do you want to do that? Because eventually the root system is going to run into your soil anyways. We can't amend all the soil. Maybe we can. I mean, you could. You could actually take and till and compost and perlite into your entire flower bed. But if you're amending just your hole, then you want to make sure you dig the hole 3 times wider than the root ball. So when you have a root ball of a plant, so I've got a shrub rose right here. So I want to dig my hole as wide as this, 3 times wider. So I want plenty of space on the outside to be able to plant this plant, to be able to backfill it. And then I don't want to dig it any deeper really. If I dig the hole a little bit deeper, that's fine. Just put a little bit of soil back in. Whenever we plant our rose, we want that top of that root ball to match up with the top of our soil. In fact, I plant everything a little bit higher just to be on the safe side. The worst thing that can happen is it goes below the soil level, then all the soil and water compacts down on that plant and it sinks and it can become a big issue in the future. So keep that plant planted right level with the ground. That top of that root ball needs to match your level of soil. If anything, plant it a little bit higher and just take a little bit of soil and mound it up to the sides of that root ball. Don't add any dirt to the top of the root ball. And that's kind of how you plant. Now, I omitted one thing here. I just thought about it. I didn't think about it when I was doing this presentation, is Biotone Starter. Biotone Starter is a great starter plant food that you can use at the beginning of planting. You got to use it in the hole. So it's really, really important. This is a beneficial bacteria, mycorrhizae, very, very helpful plant food. It's not only got the nutrients that it needs, but it's got these beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizae. They attach themselves to the root system of the plant that'll last the entire lifespan of the plant. Forms a symbiotic relationship and it just booms that root system so that it can get more nutrients and it can be much healthier, and you're going to lose a lot less plants if you use Biotone Starter. So I'm sorry I didn't put a picture in there, but it's a Spoma Biotone Starter plant food, and it's a great one. We carry it all the time, and it's something I recommend, especially when planting trees and shrubs, but definitely planting anything. I always have a big bag around so I can throw a handful or 2 in the hole when I'm planting something. And that's what you got to do. You got to get it right around that root system right away. So great option there that you should consider. So planting, very easy, pretty simple. Mulching. Mulching is super important. I recommend mulching pretty much everything. In fact, I'm even mulching my containers these days a lot. So you can use any type of mulch when it comes to roses. You can use pine or cypress or cedar, hardwood mulch, pine straw, any of the mulches, any of the organic, natural mulches is what I would prefer. I don't prefer rock as much because it can heat up, but if rock is what you've got in your landscape already and you want to pop a rose in, it's not bad. And rubber mulches I don't really recommend as much anymore, but this is going to break down naturally, add organic matter to the soil, and what it really does is it keeps your soil temperature consistent, and that's really important when it comes to roses. They don't like a lot of fluctuation in their soil temperature, so we want to keep that soil temperature consistent throughout the season. And it's going to get higher, of course, but these sharp fluctuations that you'll see as we get cold some nights and then warm some days, that'll affect the soil temperature, and so mulch really helps with that. It also keeps weeds out, which is very important. We don't want weeds growing up around the base of our plants. That can cause disease and fungus issues as it creates an area for those to kind of breed and work their way up into the shrub. So it keeps that out. It'll keep moisture in the soil, so it'll help with watering, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But it helps really with watering, keeps your that moisture right in that area, retains moisture, and prevents the runoff that you see if you're just watering straight dirt. You're going to see all these kind of runoff areas where the water is running off. So mulching really helps with that. It makes it look good, so that's really important. And it's just a great way to add organic matter over time, and it just kind of finishes it off and makes it look good. So nothing but benefits when it comes to mulch. So definitely recommend mulching your rose bushes. Watering, super important. So now we've planted our shrub, we've mulched it, and I forgot to mention about mulch. Mulch also prevents the splatter of mud from popping up. I always talk about that when I talk about tomato plants, but it's really important with roses too. When we get a heavy rainfall, that splatter of mulch or that splatter of dirt coming up from the ground if there's no mulch can cause a lot of disease issues as well, because it'll get on the lower branches of the shrub and cause lots of issues. So I definitely recommend mulching, because it'll keep that splatter of the mud down as well. Okay, so watering. Mulching will help you watering, but watering is very, very important. We want to water with this dram tool almost exclusively. It is my favorite thing to use. I've got one right here. It is the best thing to use when watering. And why is that? Well, three main reasons. One, it's going to save your back because it's got this long tube on it. So these are about, I think they're 36 inches, 30 inches, so almost 3 feet long, 2.5 feet long. Very easy to get right down to the root ball, which is the most important thing about this. It also has a breaker on the end, so where it's going to break the water, so we don't get that huge rush of water where you might need to fill up a watering can, and guess what? You just unscrew this and you can fill up a watering can real quick. But the breaker is really, really nice because it breaks that water and makes it more of kind of a rainfall feel to it. So it's not going to wash away a lot of soil real quick, and it's really, really easy when mulching. And then it's got the on and off valve, which is going to make your life so easy because you can stop watering and you can move on to another section, and it just makes life so much easier when you've got this on and off valve that you can stop the water, move on to another section. Very, very easy. It's great for watering hanging baskets, but what I love for it is watering shrubs. You can lay it down right at the base of the shrub and just let it water the shrub for about a good 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes if you want to stand there and hold it, you want to water the base of the shrub. That's very, very important. That is the most important thing when we're talking about roses, is don't water the leaves. Not many plants take in moisture through the leaves to keep it alive. They all take moisture in and release moisture, but typically moisture on the leaves is what's going to cause issues. So dampness and darkness cause fungus. I always say that whenever I'm talking about lawns, shrubs, vegetables, all of those things. So don't use a sprinkler system. Don't rely on your sprinkler system, and use a dram watering wand. It's the best thing that you can possibly do. It's going to make your life so much easier. It's going to save your back, and it's going to save your roses and keep them healthy. So typically we want to water, if we plant a new rose, somewhere between every 2 to 3 days for the next 2 to 3 weeks. That gets it pretty well established. And then we just got to watch it through the summer. Roses don't have a hugely deep root system. They're pretty shallow rooted, which makes them easy to transplant, which is kind of nice. So if we're ever kind of trying to move them around or do some different things, they're not as hard to move and transplant as some other larger shrubs. But because of that shallow root system, we want to watch it. It'll tell us if it's hot and the soil is dry and the plant is hanging, then we need to water. We need to go out there and give it a good soaking in the middle of summer if we need to. But water the root system, that's where it gets the water from. That's very, very important. Once they're established, they really don't require a ton of watering from us. Just in extreme temperatures and in extreme drought periods where we aren't getting as much water. So other than that, it's pretty simple. You just got to get it established. And that dram watering wand will save you very, very much. All right, let's talk about pruning. Pruning is a tricky one when it comes to roses, but we're going to talk about kind of all of it real quick. These are some of the pruning tools you might need. So bypass pruners. Very, very important not to use anvil pruners. I should have put a picture on, but anvil pruners basically have a flat surface and the blade goes straight into it. It crushes the stem. Bypass pruners are going to make it like a scissor cut, so they actually cross and they're going to create the best type of cut for you. And then you've got your hedge pruners, and then your lopping pruners. So lopping pruners are for bigger branches. We're going to use that when we're talking about dormant pruning. We'll probably use that because it's a little bit easier to get into. And you know what I didn't think about adding either was gloves. You might need a good pair of gloves because roses have thorns. And we carry, some nice gauntlet gloves that are long and made of leather or hide so that they can protect your arms from any type of thorn when you're getting in there and working on your shrubs. But you can be pretty careful, but I definitely recommend just either a regular pair of gloves or maybe even some rose pruning gloves. But these are the 3 pruners that you're going to need when we talk about pruning. Now, dormant pruning. This is what you're going to do typically around Valentine's Day. It's an easy day to remember, right? Valentine's Day, roses. So in our neck of the woods here in the Hampton Roads area especially, but pretty much on most of the areas in Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Valentine's Day is the best day to do dormant pruning. And what that means is your shrub is dormant, and it probably looks like this. It probably looks like a big mess. You know, you got branches everywhere. It had a great season last year, and we want to take it back to about 5 to 7 of the best canes. And so, you know, I've looked for videos of this. I actually did a video a long time ago. It's kind of tricky and it's harder to see sometimes. And I really like these drawings because I think it explains it very, very easily. So unpruned, you can see, is kind of messy, lots of crossing branches. Maybe there's some dead branches, and then you might see like black branches. And this is really, and I should have probably said, this is really for your hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas, where we're going to do this kind of heavier pruning. So why did I show that picture of that hedge trimmer? Well, the hedge trimmer is for our shrub roses. For knockout roses, they don't really care as much. We don't have to go in and really do all of this kind of, you know, heavy pruning and this different pruning. We just go in and just kind of shape it, cut it back to control the size a little bit if you want. You really don't have to do anything. Some people want to let them get to 4 feet. You can even use hedge shears on them in the middle of the summer. If they're kind of in between their big blooms, you can just go out to your knockout rose, your carpet rose, and give it a light shear, and that'll encourage more growth. We're going to talk about deadheading here in a second as well. But that's why I have the hedge shears. You're not going to really use it for your hybrid teas, grandifloras, or floribundas. And then really this kind of applies, so kind of listen to this, but it really does kind of similarly apply to our climbing roses as well. So unpruned, kind of messy. What we want to end up with is this pruned look. And what that means is we want to go in and select about 5 to 7 of the best canes. And so roses grow on big, long canes. If you've ever bought a dormant rose, this is what it looks like. And what we want to do is find the 5 to 7 best ones, and we want them all to be pretty much outward facing. So we want them to be kind of, you know, not from the interior. So I'd like to eliminate the ones on the inside and keep the strongest, best looking ones on the outside. The best way that I've ever described it is it can kind of look like if you try and like hold your hand out and keep nothing in the center, no fingers in the center, you know, that's kind of what you want, is all of your canes to be kind of outward facing and eliminate some of that interior cane. We want to cut it to about, you know, anywhere from 17 or 18 inches to about 24 inches. You want to get it down in size. The thicker the wood you cut into, the better the shoots typically are that are going to come out of it. And every few years you're going to form some new canes, and older canes will die off. That's completely natural. You'll get new canes down here from the base, they'll shoot up, you'll get new growth off of it, and then they'll harden off and you can use those as new canes in the future. But we want to eliminate the ones in the center because we're trying to create good airflow to keep disease and fungus out. So we're trying to increase airflow and increase sunlight as well. We want the sunlight to get in there. So we want 5 to 7 of the best canes on the outside facing out, and then we always want to cut it on an angle too. So we always want to cut it about a 45-degree angle because a flat cut is going to allow moisture to build up on the top, which can increase the percolation of disease and funguses into the stem. So we always want to cut on a 45 angle. Doesn't have to be exact, but just kind of cut as you make your cuts on an angle. Now the lopping shears are going to be really important here. So those big lopper shears that you see over there that he's using on that tree, those are going to be great for when you're doing this because you can go in and kind of, you might take head shears and just kind of cut off the top. I've done that before just to eliminate some of the mess. And then get in there with your lopping shears, eliminate stuff because you can get in there and they might be thicker branches, whereas a bypass pruner might not do quite enough for you. It's pretty, you know, pretty light wood, so you can cut through it with, you know, pretty good ease. You don't need anything electrical. You don't need like a gas-powered chainsaw or anything like that. All hand tools will be perfectly fine. But this is what you want to do in the winter. So this is how you're going to do it. Now with climbing roses, we're going to do the same thing, but we want to leave it attached. So what we're doing is eliminating all the shoots that are coming off of our trellis or our arbor or whatever we might be growing it on, because it does need support. So whatever it's being supported by, we basically are going to just take it and put it back on that, which what that means is keeping those canes that have grown up through the trellis or the support, and then taking off all the growth that's kind of hanging off of those canes. And we want to just take it back to the trellis. And then you could eliminate some weaker wood, and by that point, usually what I'll do is I'll first start with hedge shears, kind of trim it back, get it nice and tight. Then I'll take my hand pruners and tighten it up so I've just got my good canes that are on the wall. And then I'll look for crossing branches, diseased wood, black wood, dead wood, any of those types of things, and get that completely out. And even at the end, I'll kind of go to the top and just tip it and bring it down just a little bit. I don't want to, eliminate the size too much, but roses are always going to grow. You're going to hear me say this a lot when we're talking about this pruning. roses are going to grow really, really well from stronger wood. So whenever we're making cuts, we always want to cut into some stronger wood because you're going to get bigger, more robust growth out of that stronger wood than if you just tip it on the top or just take that little seed pod off. We'll talk about that here in deadheading in a second. But you always want to prune into thicker wood. It's really going to help you. It's going to benefit you a lot. So that's what we're going to talk about next is deadheading. And Katrina, you said miss pruning. You actually came in, I think, right around the time that we started. So you haven't missed much. Deadheading, this is what we're going to do in season. So this is really, really important. Especially when we're talking about floribundas, grandifloras, hybrid teas. When we're talking about our long stem roses, this is really, really important that we understand how to do this and how to do it effectively. And because if you don't, your roses aren't going to bloom very well. I'll just be honest with you. Now let's get knockout roses and climbing roses out of the way real quick. Knockout roses don't really have to be deadheaded. Shrub roses typically don't really need to. They're designed for the seed not to be viable. Plants bloom for a reason. The plant is blooming to reproduce, so to form a seed. So if we take away that seed production, it'll keep on blooming. Well, shrub roses, like carpet roses and knockout roses, the seed isn't viable. The plant realizes it's not viable, so it stops putting energy into it. And a lot of times, if you go up to a knockout rose, you'll see a dead bloom on the inside, a dead seed head, and new blooms coming up around it. That's completely natural. Now you can deadhead it, and sometimes I'll do it to control size a little bit. So I can take my head shears out there and I can go and just kind of, lightly tip the whole thing, take off some of those, maybe even cut it back a little bit, and you'll get more growth coming out of that from there if you want to. If you want to let them get size, just let them be. You don't really need to do much. You'll have some fluctuations in blooming when it comes to knockout roses and carpet roses. You'll have a big bloom set. It'll kind of fizzle because all those seeds have got to kind of die basically or finish producing. And then once the plant says, well, these aren't going to be viable, then it just sends out new blooms again. So repeat blooming, very, very easy. Don't have to do much, or you can do a little bit of light pruning. If you want to be real particular, you can definitely go in there and hand prune all the little dead heads out if you want to, but you don't need to. Now, climbing roses. Climbing roses are pretty easy as well. It's going to be similar to this, so it's going to be more similar to how I'm going to tell you how to cut this because they're more in line with the floribundas, grandifloras, and hybrid teas than a shrub rose. But you don't have to do as much. They're fairly because they're growing on such heavier cane work or they're putting out so much more growth, you don't typically have to do as much, but you will still want to go in there and get some of it out because it'll help with the blooming and keep it blooming very well. So kind of use this information that I'm about to show you when you're pruning your climbing roses, your traditional climbing roses. All right, so deadheading, hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas. Kind of tricky because I have a little bit of a different viewpoint than maybe some. So you're going to see here on this image that it says to cut when you find 2 leaflet leaves or 2 5-leaflet leaves. So basically your leaves are going to come out of the main stem. So you've got that main stem there shooting up, and then you can see this, look at this bottom set here. You can count the leaflets on there. So that's really 1 leaf, but it's all leaflets. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves on that little leaflet. And so what you want to do is you want to find that first. If you find 3, which is typically what you're going to find closer to the top of the rose, where the rose bud was, then if you cut there, you're going to be cutting into weaker wood, and it's not going to produce as well. So what they say here is a little bit better than what a lot of people say. A lot of people say find the first leaflet of 5 leaves. Well, so that would be that top one. So you see a 3, and then a 5. So a lot of people would cut right above that. Well, that's okay, but it's not quite thick enough wood. So you can see where the former cut was. We may not want to cut there. We may want to cut that out depending on how size is. That's fine. But typically you want to find this at least where there's 2 of the 5 leaflet leaves. Once you find 2 of them on opposite sides of each other, or fairly opposite, they're not always completely opposite. Sometimes they're staggered a little bit. But once you find 2 nice, strong, healthy ones and you feel like it's thick enough wood, that's where you want to make the cut. And I'm going to show you here. I've got one that I can prune for you, so hopefully you can see this. I tried to make the screen a little bit bigger, and we'll try maybe zooming in a little bit here. But I've got a great, let's see which one we got here. This is Julia Child, one of my favorites because it's actually got a little bit of like kind of shrub rose quality in there, but I believe it's a floribunda. Let's see, I don't know if I'll be able to, yeah, floribunda. So Julia Child is a great one. Floribunda, so Floribundas are going to be more on that smaller size, get about 3 to 4 to 5 feet high at the max, really more on like the 3 to 4 foot range. I think we've got some planted here in the landscape. They look absolutely amazing. So you can see more of these clusters of flowers. So a great example of that is going to be right here. You're going to get one flower here, but you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buds around here. So how do we prune this? Well, even if this were a long stem rose, all of this applies. So I'll show you a great example here as I kind of can turn the shrub here. Here's a dead bloom right here. You know, the petals are falling off and it's going to start forming that seed, and when it goes into seed production, it's not going to bloom as heavily. So let me grab my pruners here. Bypass pruners, make sure you got bypass pruners, they cut like scissors. And here, instead of taking off all of these flowers, so we've got more buds coming here on the same stem. So I don't want to go in and take this stem back, I just want to take this dead head out. So that's pretty easy. We can just go in and we can clip that dead head out. Very, very simple. That way it stops producing a seed because it's sending energy into this. It wants to create a seed. So it's trying to create a viable seed, and a lot of these will have it. That'll take the energy and put it into the other blooms, because now all these other blooms will form nice full shapes. The energy won't be zapped away from it, and that's why it's beneficial. So we got another one over here. So we can see dead one coming, 2, 3 coming, and then we've actually got another stem shooting up over here and another little piece down here. I'll show you that here in a little bit. But this one is just easy, just deadhead it like that. And even on your hybrid teas or, your hybrid teas, Floribundas, grandiflora is a little bit more similar because you can get more clusters of flowers. Sometimes on hybrid teas, you're going to get 2 to 3 flowers on a stem. So you can do that, just taking the deadhead off and letting the other flowers bloom. Now, what if you've got more of a bloom like this? Now, this one's not quite done yet, but it's pretty close. So you can see this guy right here. So this flower is, getting a little old, it's faded. Still got pretty good fragrance to it. Maybe I want to cut it off and bring it inside. Maybe that's what we're doing. So if we're using them for floral arrangements, or we want to just put it in a vase by itself, we want a long stem. 1, that's important. But 2, we want to make a proper cut. And that's really, really important. So I'm going to see if I can get this a little bit closer to show you this flower. So this is the flower we're working on right here. You can see it moving. So this guy has, let's see if I can part kind of everything and just get this one to stand out by itself. So this one's got a first leaflet here of 3. Next leaflet is 3. This one is 5. And then I've got a 5. So that would say I've got 2 5s. And then look at this. I've got this little, I don't know if you can quite see it. Let's see if I can clear some stuff out here. So right in here, trust me, if you can't see it, right here, I've got right on my finger, I've got this new shoot of red growth. That's what new growth typically looks like on roses. So it's got a little bit of a red tinge on it. But I've got this new shoot of growth here. And so now I'm sitting there saying, well, now I've got a bloom coming there. There, that leaf was in my way. Maybe now you can see it. So right here, you can see this new growth. And that is going to form a bloom, but it might not be very big because it's coming out of weaker wood. And it's already forming even though there's a flower on top. So as hard as this is going to be, I want to cut that out. And so what I want to do is I want to find some stronger wood. Now I'm going to look down in here and see if I can find a little bit stronger wood. 1, maybe I want to cut this rose just to enjoy it in the house, so I need a longer stem. But 2, I really want to cut into some thicker wood to allow that new growth to be very, very strong and robust. So we've got 1 3 leaflet, 3 leaflet, a 5, a 5. It would say you could cut in this range right here. But then I go down here and I find another 5 and another 5, and the wood starts to get thicker and it's a little bit stronger. So I'm going to go in here, and then what you can do, this gets a little bit more specific, but what I can do here is I can start to look and say, okay, I've got lots of branches over here, I've got lots of branches over here. I really wanted to kind of go in this direction, so I've got 1 leaflet that's facing that way. I've got another leaflet that's facing this way. So if I want the rose to kind of come up in here and fill in this void here, then I want to cut right above this one. And what I want to do is cut away from the leaflet, so where the leaf kind of comes out. Let me go, let's see if we can do this. Go back to this image. Get my shrub out of the way. Well, went the wrong way with it. So when we go back to this image here, you're going to see this leaflet of 5. So wherever we're cutting, so you can see that line. So if you can see that line where it says cut. So see cut, and then follow it into the drawing and see how it's cutting away from the leaflet. So if my arm is the branch and the leaflet's coming out here, I want to cut at an angle so that moisture doesn't build up around where that leaflet is, because that break where the leaflet comes out of the branch, that is where that new shoot is going to come from. So let's go back and we'll actually prune this. See if we can get as close as we possibly can. Flowers fading. This is my shoot here. I've gone down, I've determined where I want to prune it, and this will go much faster to you as you go along. And then I just want to prune it just at an angle, about 45 degrees away, and I've got a nice long stem here that I can grow from. Now, as these shrubs get bigger, this is a kind of a pitiful example of a longer stem, but typically you would say prune it where I was before. Let's see if I've got another one. Oh yeah, here's the one I was working on. So this makes a little bit more sense. This one is fading a little bit, but this one is really the one we were doing. Sorry about that. So new growth is coming from here. Hate to cut that out, but it's gonna have to go. So I come down, I find the angle that I want, and now we're gonna cut into a little bit thicker wood. I've got my leaflet, I'm gonna cut away from it, and then I just cut. So let's see if you can see that. There's my 45-degree angle. It's away from the leaflet, so if water hits this, if this were the opposite angle, if it hits it, it's going to run off, and it's going to run away from my leaflet. So on that branch, there was a leaflet coming from this angle, cut away from it, and that way you don't have that. Then you got a little bit of a longer stem than my other one. Now, unfortunately, you can see that new growth in there. That's going to have to go. But if I want to take this and put it in a vase, I'm going to take these branches off anyways. So typically we're going to go through and do like this and just pull these off. And then I can go sit that in a vase and enjoy this rose, even though it's faded a little bit. But if it's still on the plant and you're just doing it to deadhead it, that's how you want to do it. Cut into thicker wood, whereas originally I would have said maybe to cut here. So I've taken off I went 1, 2, 3 leaflets lower than where it said I could have cut if I wanted to. And that's because that stronger wood that I cut into is now going to allow new, stronger growth to shoot from it, and you're going to be much, much happier, trust me. And you've got that cut down there, it looks good, probably about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch above the leaflet. You don't have to go too far away from it. And you just don't want to get right up on it. So very, very easy to prune roses and deadhead them. Not too hard at all. It is required, I will tell you that. You do have to prune them. If you don't prune them, you're not going to get as many blooms. So let's talk about care now to kind of wrap up this kind of complete coverage of growing great roses. If you want to be organic and safe and earth-friendly, which is all great, let's do that if we can, then use these products. These are great. Triple Action, neem oil, and spinosad soap. So spinosad is a natural insecticide. It works on Japanese beetles. Japanese beetles are one of the main insects that get on roses. You can also get thrips, spider mites, aphids. They can come with some insect issues for sure. We can control all of those, and we can control everything organically. Typically with organics, you're going to be doing a little bit more spraying, and you want to stay it on a little bit more. Neem oil is a great one for black spot or powdery mildew. So that's a really, really good one. Now when I think it was, let's see, Kristen asked about the virus resistant. Well, most of the varieties that we carry these days are pretty resistant to the viruses. Of course, there are viruses out there that once you get, you can't really control. Rose rosettes is obviously a big one. You don't typically see that one as much, but those are soil-borne viruses, and once it's in the soil, it's very hard to get it out, so you gotta basically take your roses out and plant something different, unfortunately. But diseases are pretty easy to control. Black spot fungus and powdery mildew are pretty much the two big ones. Sometimes you might see holes in your leaves. It could be shot hole fungus is another one, but it also could be rose slugs, which is basically just a little worm that eats the undersides of the leaves. Those can become a pretty big problem, and spinosad soap is a great option to control that. Neem oil actually has some natural insecticide as well. Now that's why I put the picture of Triple Action in there. Triple Action is OMRI listed. It is one of my favorites because whenever it comes to insect or disease or fungus issues, it's always preventative is better than curative. We always want to prevent it rather than trying to cure it. because it's going to be easier to do. And so triple action is one of my favorites because I use this pretty much consistently throughout the season. I'll typically do it, I just did it probably about 3 weeks ago, so I'll probably do it again in about 3 weeks. I try and do it about every 6 weeks to pretty much everything in my yard as much as possible, especially my ornamental plants. So my shrubs, my my boxwoods, I do it a lot on my boxwoods. It's got neem oil and pyrethrin. So neem oil, of course, same as this. The pyrethrum is from chrysanthemum oil and is a natural insecticide. So we can control a lot of the insects and put this neem oil coating, which helps be very, very preventative. So Jillian said what to use when neem oil isn't helping for black spot and you already pruned and done all the preventative care already. So then we might have to go stronger. We might have to go traditional. So I'll talk about that in just a second, Jillian. But these are great organic products. Triple action I use as a preventative, sometimes a curative, but I really use it as a preventative. If I've got really bad black spot or powdery mildew, I'm going to probably attack it with just straight neem oil. Now oils you got to be careful with when it becomes really warm. Any temperatures above 85, 90 degrees, we don't want to spray it in the middle part of the day. You can still spray, just spray it in the evening or early in the morning. It's a great option. Spinosad soap is a great one just to control all those pesky insects and be organic and safe and friendly too. Now, Jillian, this is where our traditional rose care can come into play. Now, these are a little bit more what I like to just say traditional products. So these are going to be kind of a great way to, if you've got big problems. So Jillian, if I've got black spot, I get it really, really bad. Well, one, pruning can help. Raking up debris, Jillian, is a great option. So a lot of times we have black spot from the year before. The leaves fall down, they're around the plant. We don't rake them up and get them out of there. That is definitely something that will help you. But sometimes it's in there and we got to get it out. And F-stop is a great one, or our 2-in-1 systemic. So the 2-in-1 systemic is going to be a systemic insecticide and a systemic fungicide. Our F-stop is a great systemic fungicide as well. So these both come in liquid forms. Gets absorbed into the plant and treats the disease or the fungus from the inside out. So it's a great way. It's going to last a long time. I think F-stop's right around 6-8. I think they're both 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that kind of time frame. F-stop might be 4 to 6, and then 2-in-1 systemic is 6 to 8. And then I'm sure you've all probably seen the Rose and Flower Care from Bio Advanced, which is a great one. That one's got your, basically it's this product with a little bit of plant food in it. And we carry all of these. These are great options, very, very easy to use. So when it comes to using traditional methods, then sometimes it's necessary. So if you've got a really bad infestation of something, then you might want to use these. Now, if you've got bees frequenting your roses, then like the 2-in-1 systemic is not like the best for the bees. So if we're trying to be careful, maybe not using these as much, but only when the infestation is really bad, maybe towards the end of the season or when it's not blooming as much when the bees are out on the pollen. So F-stop is completely safe for bees. That is just stopping funguses. So that would be what I would use, Jillian. Rake up the leaf litter, get that out of there. Maybe refresh the mulch. If you got mulch in there, scrape out some of the old mulch and use new mulch. But these are great products if you're in dire straits. But I always say better to be preventative than curative. So let's start organic with triple action is a great option to kind of get out there and spray. And it's easy to use and won't kill insects over a long period of time, meaning it won't be in the system of the plant. All right, now plant food. Roses produce flowers and produce lots of flowers. And to produce flowers, we need phosphorus and we need nutrients and we need all of those great things. And so we're going to want to feed our plants. Rosetone is a great one. It's a great option. Rosetone is a very well-balanced diet for roses designed specifically for them. It's organic. It's easy to use. If you accidentally dump the entire bag on the plant, it's not going to kill it, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But it's a great plant food. Very easy to use. A couple handfuls, maybe a couple scoops. Apply it right to the top surface, right around the drip line of the rose. So basically, if I'm a rose, kind of about typically, where my leaflets kind of are hanging out, where my outer branches are, it's going to be kind of my drip zone. We just apply it in a nice ring in that area. You don't have to work it into the mulch necessarily, just water in it after you're done. It's a great one. Our green leaf plant food is a great one for this area for all things roses, hydrangeas, hollies, boxwoods, camellias, rhododendrons, I mean pretty much everything that you can think of when it comes to shrubs or perennials or even annuals. Our green leaf is a great plant food. And then if you're kind of lacking some blooms, remember I mentioned phosphorus. Whenever we're looking at our 3 numbers on a bag of plant food, those 3 numbers mean things. There are macronutrients, they're the big ones. So the first one is green, is upward. So whenever I talk about the 3 numbers, it's up, down, all around. So nitrogen is the first number, that's a 9 on this one. So that's gonna be upward growth. So it's gonna be a little bit of green up. But the next one is 58, and that's phosphorus. And that means the majority of this bag is phosphorus, which is gonna help produce blooms. And that means when I say down, which is up, down, so the down part is rooting, but also blooming. That's why this is called a blooming and rooting formula. It's water soluble, which means it acts very quickly and can kind of, kick your shrubs, your roses back into gear and get them blooming again, because it takes a lot of phosphorus to produce blooms in general. And then potassium's a little bit lower on this because it's just an all-around protector. This is really designed to boost blooms, whereas some other ones like our green leaf is going to be a 12-4-8, so it's a little bit higher on the greening up, but it's got a little bit of phosphorus and then it's got a lot of potassium as a protector. So great options for plant food. These are some great ones. There's a lot of different things out there. Even just a plant tone would be perfectly fine. But they do need feed. They do need plant food. And I typically resort to the granular types like rose tone and green leaf, because it's going to be something that I can do probably about every 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks through the growing season. And that's going to keep my blooms going and keep the plants very, very healthy and keep them viable all the way through the season and keep them producing. So that's really kind of the all-around rose care. I mean, pretty simple. We talked about the varieties. We talked about how you can use them in the landscape. We talked about, or I shouldn't say varieties, the groups. We've got lots of varieties. It would take an entire hour just to go through all the different varieties of roses. But we talked about shrubs as a group, climbing roses as a group, floribundas, hybrid teas, and grandifloras as a group. So you've got a lot of different types of. Sorry, I think our stream kind of left us there. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can reconnect. All right, so we talked about all of our different types and our groups. We talked about the uses in the landscape. And then we talked about where to place them. Sunlight, we need sunlight, we need the right pH, we need to water them, we need to mulch them, we need to amend the soil when we plant them. So we've talked about all the basics there. We talked about pruning, I know probably a little bit longer, but pruning is important. Deadheading in the season to prevent the plant from producing seeds, especially on our hybrid teas, floribundas, and grandifloras. And then we talked about how easy it is to take care of shrub roses. We talked about dormant pruning, and then lastly we talked about plant care. Better to be preventative than curative. Use organics if you can. If we've got to resort to traditional methods, we can help you there. And then feed your plants. Very, very important. If you do all of those things, you're going to grow great roses, because it really is the queen of all flowers. It is great, instant gratification, one of my favorite ones to grow. If you're just getting into it and you just kind of want to start, maybe you start with a shrub rose, or maybe you just do one. Maybe you do one in a pot. You can do lots and lots of different things with them. We've got great collection of them, and they're so easy to grow. Make great gifts, and great cut flowers. Obviously, roses are great cut flowers. So grow a few roses and you'll have plenty of roses to give for Mother's Day each year. And then at Valentine's Day, you got to go buy them, but you got to prune your roses too. So great option for the landscape and an amazing plant. And hopefully this helps you enjoy roses for many, many years to come, as I do. So hope you all have a great day. I don't see any other questions, so I think we're all great, and enjoy the weather. And we hope to see you here at McDonald Garden Center. Bye, everybody.